Well, the UFC Fight Night London post-fight press conference just wrapped up, so it is time to make sense of a wacky main event here at the O2. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. This is the MMAfighting.com post-fight wrap-up show. That, once again, is Simon Head of the Sun. Thank you for joining us again. And that, of course, is my good pal, Carroll of Fightland, SevereMMA.com, and the Irish Mirror. Did I get them all?
Yeah, you nailed it again. Well,
all right. Guys, let's make sense of it. Michael Bisping defeated Anderson Silva, a decade-long journey for the count. He finally got it done. He finally got over the hump. He wins via unanimous decision, but not without some controversy. So let me ask you first. In your opinion, did Bisping do enough to win that fight?
I had him winning at 48-47. I gave him rounds 1, 2, and 4 in that fight. I think round 3 obviously was for Anderson Silva. I think Silva poured it on in the last round. I think he knew he was behind on the cards, and Bisping was pretty much in survival mode by then. But other than that, I thought it was a superb, controlled, mature performance by Michael Bisping. I thought he did everything he needed to do and showed a great game plan. And that's all the maturity that comes from fighting 25 times in the octagon. We saw it all come out here tonight, and he got the landmark win that he's been looking for his whole career.
PT, how'd you score it?
I scored the same. I had him up by 1 round. I think the really interesting thing about the fight was the end of each round. The first round, Anderson's doubling. Second round, then he's gone back, and then of course we have the third round, which is absolutely incredible. It was probably one of the most dramatic moments I've ever witnessed live. Probably maybe Travis Brown and Andrei Arlovski. Other than that, but it was incredible. Nobody knew what was going on. The fans thought it was over. Then all of a sudden they separate. There's a bit, and then they're just in their corners getting ready for the next round. It was absolutely unbelievable. It's all the drama of a Shakespearean play in London.
Yeah, it was truly drama filled. Let's talk about that third round. Let's fast forward to that third round. So just to recap, it appears as though Michael Bisping's mouthpiece falls out. He's for some reason signaling to Herb Dean in the midst of an exchange. He says there wasn't that much action. I thought that there was. It didn't seem like a very veteran move on his part to stop the action. Herb Dean, he wants him to stop the action. That doesn't happen, and then he essentially gets knocked out. But it seemed to have come after the buzzer. We were in attendance, hard to really hear anything. Do you think Herb Dean made the right call by A, not letting him pick up the mouthpiece, and 2, or B, I should say, allowing the fight to continue despite the knockout?
Well, first off, I mean, I was in the arena, I was octagon side. I didn't hear the buzzer.
Right.
I haven't watched a replay yet, so I couldn't tell you whether the knee came before or after the buzzer, so it would be unfair of me to comment on that. In terms of the mouthpiece falling out, I don't think you can complain with what Herb Dean did in there. It wasn't like there was a break in action. Bisping he didn't spit the mouthpiece out. He got knocked out of his mouth, and he looked straight down at the floor. He looked down like this, and Anderson saw his moment, and being the former champion and true veteran he is, he saw his chance. He was losing the fight. I think he knew he was losing the fight. He went for it, and what we saw, the thing was Bisping did it twice. He motioned twice, and it was the second time he was backed up against the fence. He kind of backpedaled out of the way to try and open up some space so he could gesticulate. But as he did it, he opened up just enough room for Anderson to set up that flying knee, and you won't see many connect better than that one. It was quite astonishing to see, and Bisping obviously crumpled to the floor, and then all hell broke loose because the klaxon had gone off at some point during that. And even at octagon side, people were looking at each other and asking each other, "Is the fight over? Is the fight over?" And I watched the referee, and I watched the way he was behaving. And he wasn't acting as if the fight was over. Normally when the fight's over, the referee will very clearly wave their hands above their head like this. There was none of that. There was none of that at all. Silva was off running around the octagon. In hindsight, that helped Michael Bisping because all of the kerfuffle, everything that was happening in the octagon was buying Bisping time. And then obviously in the fourth round, Bisping punched straight low and caught Anderson Silva low. I'm not suggesting it was deliberate. Certainly didn't hurt his cause because it helped him have even more recovery time. But that incident at the end of the third round is probably the craziest. That along with Conor McGregor's knockout of Jose Aldo at 194. Those two instances are probably the two single craziest instances I've seen live watching a UFC event.
I'm fairly certain this is the first time the word kerfuffle has been used on one of our wrap-up shows, so well done to you.
I'm happy to bring it to you.
Yes. I got to admit, I was thinking, oh no, it can't end like this. You know, he's winning the first 2 rounds, he's winning the fight, and then he's going to end like that. He's going to lose the fight like this. I was a little gutted for Michael just because it seemed like he had a mental lapse. What did you make of how the whole situation went down?
It was incredible to be there, to see everything the way it unraveled. Perillo screaming in his face, "You're fine, you're fine." He's going, oh, okay, it must be fine. Then the fourth round starts. Nogueira's screaming at Anderson, "Pasivo." This is what I can't speak Portuguese, but it seemed like he was saying, "Be passive." And I was going, why would you be passive here? You should be all over him. But Bisping went straight for him in the fourth. It was absolutely incredible. And people were still trying to understand what had happened. I actually got to see the replay. The knee landed and then the klaxon went. I thought it was the other way around.
Wow.
But then that opens up another argument. If it had happened that way, should you have scored that knee as illegal? Right. Should there have been point? I don't really know what would have happened there. But absolutely insane. Bisping saves the day for UK MMA again.
Right.
We had all this build up. I spoke yesterday at the pre-fight show, and I was saying Tom Breeze is going to come in with this emphatic win. It didn't happen. And then Gegard Mousasi and Latest, there was kind of that lull. There was a lull in the crowd. We saw it there. The fans weren't participating. Then Song 2 starts coming over the speakers. It seems even louder when it's in England.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The whole crowd screaming, the Union Jack over his shoulders. It just seemed like Bisping was primed for this moment. I think he could have put 5 guys in the octagon for the last 30 seconds of that fight, and he still would have stood there and taken everything, covered in blood. His cornermen walked out in front of us at the end of the fight. Bisping walked there, his face was opened up, and a big bucket of water filled with blood, crimson, dark blood. It's just, it kind of reminds you how much these guys give when they go in there, and they just put it out on the line there. Anderson's in his post-fight speech in Portuguese, he said, this is corruption the way it is in Brazil, but I certainly had 3 rounds for Bisping, and I think it's a night that we'll never forget.
That third round sequence, shades of Husimar Palhares versus Dan Miller at UFC 134. Also, if you recall, Chris Cyborg versus Shayna Baszler in Elite XC, a very bizarre situation, but none bigger than what we saw here. So I'm wondering about Anderson Silva, because it always felt to me like he was holding back, like he could, throw out an onslaught, like he could pressure him a little more. And for some reason, he was playing around. It's like, Anderson, what are you doing? Haven't you learned that you should stop playing around? It just felt like he allowed Michael to win this fight. I'm not taking anything away from Michael. I thought he won the fight of his life, but I was surprised at how Anderson fought. I thought Anderson learned a lesson from the Weidman situation. He was not going to fight like that anymore. And I think he actually did a lot of this to himself, if you get what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. I think earlier on in the fight, you could make an argument that he was trying to pace himself. I think this is a guy who doesn't go to distance very often. And we obviously know about his advancing years, the fact he hadn't fought in a year. The thought of going 5 rounds in a high-paced fight with Michael Bisping, very few middleweights can actually keep the pace with the count. That's his stock in trade. High energy, high volume, 5 rounds, win the decision. But in those later rounds, especially after that knee in the third, you would have thought that the corner would be saying, he's hurt, he's ready to go, give us 60 seconds of everything. And then if he hasn't gone, then back off. But he had enough breathing room, and I thought that was really the moment for Anderson Silva to really take the fight by the scruff of the neck, and he didn't do it. But I also think that Michael Bisping showed incredible ring smarts. He didn't just go wading in. He used his feet, and as I said earlier, 25 fights in the octagon. I think a younger Michael Bisping would have walked into some shots and been stopped in that fight after that knee. I really do. But this is a guy who's been around the block a long time, and he fought to a game plan all the way through, all of the clowning around that Silva was doing up against the cage. And even at one point, Bisping stood in front of him and backed away. Yeah. And at that point, that was Bisping basically saying, I'm not buying any of these games. You can do all this, and it was all about misdirection for Silva. He's built a career on it, waving his hands while not throwing anything. But all the while he's waving his hands and clowning around, he's not scoring. And Bisping was just popping the jab, landing strikes, scoring consistently in those 2 rounds. And then at the end of the second, he got what for me was the defining moment of the fight to that point. He hit him with a big 1-2, right-left combination, dropped Silva, and then got on top and landed some big ground and pound to finish the round. At that point, Anderson Silva knew he was in a proper fight. He may not have thought he could have been hurt in that fight to that point. He caught a couple of shots early on, but at that point, he knew he could be dropped. And then any game plans and confidence start to wilt away a little bit. What you say is dead right, though. After that third round, he should have been going for it. And for whatever reason, he didn't. Michael Bisping stuck and moved, did what he did well. Powers of recovery for a guy in his late 30s are quite remarkable. And here he is. He's got the biggest win of his career. And I said to him afterwards, and I was talking to some of the guys on the way in here, as an English journalist, And as a journalist in general, you have to be impartial. And I think it's important that you are impartial. And, you know, we sometimes see it at events where you get media turn up, local media, and they're a bit cheerleady. And but as a British journalist, I'm not ashamed to say that today was difficult for me, because this is a guy who I've watched come up through the UFC. I watched him go through tough. My first credentialed UFC event was UFC 120 in this very building, where I saw him save the show against Yoshihiro Akiyama. The other Brits on the card fell by the wayside in that event. Bisping got the job done against Akiyama. Came back for adversity in that fight as well. And to see him get so close to the summit and fall at the final hurdle, time after time after time, you can't help but buy into the story and think, wouldn't it be great for him? Wouldn't it be great for this country and mixed martial arts in the UK to have our biggest star finally make it to the very top of the sport? Arguably, he could be in there with a title shot next. Whether or not we see that remains to be seen. But as I say, as a British journalist, and I said to Mike afterwards, you make it very difficult to be impartial on nights like this. And he just sort of grinned and shook my hand and said, thank you, mate. And yeah, that's kind of how it was for me.
Look at Simon getting all patriotic on us. Reminds me of when I talked to PT after Conor McGregor wins. the pride just beaming out of you. Okay, so here's the big question. Does he get a title shot next? If you're Dana White, Joe Silva, the Zuffa brass, do you give it to Michael Bisping finally?
I have to say it's a hard sell. Luke Rockhold, you know, he did a number on poor Bisping out in Australia. You know, that's why it's a hard sell. Unfortunately, if someone else was on top of there and Bisping did what he did today, you know, he might have a better chance. You know, he's already up there talking about fighting Masasi. You know, I think he knows himself it's a hard sell. You know, he often complained about the damage that was done to his left eye in that fight, and it would be completely different. But again, tonight we see his eye. You know, it's in a bad way, his left eye. And I don't think it was the same Anderson Silva tonight. He got hit a lot. And when he was moving, when he was doing his usual misdirection, he looked like he was trying to convince himself. You know, I don't think it was the same Anderson we saw there. And from the very first round, he was getting hit an awful lot. And to get dropped twice by Michael Bisping, and this is no offence to Bisping, he's never been a finisher. He's never been a guy who stops people on the feet. Anderson was down twice in the first two rounds. A guy who was literally, like, you know, indestructible until Chris Weidman did the number on him. I think it's going to be a hard sell to get him in there, but the middleweight division is in an interesting place at the moment, because a lot of people, as you said earlier, with the PED situation and stuff like that, you know, it could happen, but I doubt it, to be honest. I really do doubt it at this stage.
I think the big story, in my opinion, the maturation of Michael Bisping. Perhaps in the past, Anderson's doing all that stuff. He gets upset, he gets fired up, and strays away from the game plan. He did not do that tonight, and I thought that was very impressive. So you said back at UFC 120, Michael Bisping saved the day after a lot of the British fighters lost. Well, tonight, they won, but it didn't feel like a lot of the guys, the Tom Breezes, the Arnold Allens, had the breakout performances that a lot of people were expecting. So it ends on a good note with Michael Bisping. But let's pick out a few names. Who really impressed you tonight?
Well, you mentioned Arnold Allen. I actually was impressed by Arnold Allen, to be honest with you. He was in there with a seasoned guy. He's had a lot of fights. I think he's like 31, 32 fight veteran. That's in Meza. And I thought Allen was very mature. He didn't try and rush his performance. And arguably that should have been a stoppage win. Again, it was one of those where it was right on the buzzer. Again, I haven't seen the tape, so I couldn't tell you whether it was or wasn't. But I thought he grew into that performance. And this is a very young guy. I thought he did very well. Tom Breeze. I'm as guilty as anybody, if you like, of pumping the guy up. And I do believe that he's a guy who will be able to hang our hat on in the years to come. But he obviously had a very stringent and stern test. Keita Nakamura went in there, looked nerveless, and really gave Breeze a tough test. If you're looking at it purely on a performance basis, you might come away being disappointed. If you look at it from a career building point of view, that was a positive learning step for Tom Breeze. He went the distance for the first time in his career. He dealt with a little bit of adversity, having to be taken down. He got taken down back-to-back rounds, I think. First and second round, quite early in each round, he got taken down by Nakamura. And each time he had to work his way out of those positions against a 40-fight veteran. So it isn't necessarily headline-making. But if you look at the overall career picture of Tom Breeze, that was another rung on the ladder. As I say, not the most spectacular leap forward, perhaps, but one that I think will be valuable to him going forward. Word from Mike Wilkinson against Makwan Emekani. Thoroughly enjoyed watching that fight, and it wasn't one that went Wilkinson's way. I thought he performed relatively well considering the pressure he was under, always scrapping from the bottom. And the most important thing about that fight, there was an awful lot said in the lead up to that fight, and it was great. It's always great. This is martial arts, mixed martial arts. But the underpinning thing with martial arts is respect, and it was great to hear at the end of that the pair of them had basically shaken hands and squashed the beef, and everything was good going forward. So from a sporting point of view, that's really good to see as well.
And worth noting as well that the English fans definitely showed up. This card sold out in 25 minutes. They drew over 16,000 fans. That's a record for UK UFC action, and the gate was 2 million. So a hugely successful night for the UFC. Final word to you as we wrap up UFC Fight Night London. If I understand, you've never covered an Anderson Silva fight live, and you made it a point. You said you had to be here. You wanted to be here. Your final thoughts as we now get ready to shift gears to the madness that's about to come in Las Vegas between Conor and Nathan Diaz.
I think it was perfect. You know, I got to see glimmers of magic there tonight. I think we all saw glimmers of the spider there tonight, and that's amazing. And it does set us up very nicely for next week, which is going to be an absolute carnival. I told you how I felt about that the press conference. It was absolutely unbelievable. We came in, I already said it, we came in on Thursday, that's all we could talk about. This is going to be the most insane trash talk I've ever seen in my life. I hope it's not. Remember the last time we were over in Vegas, Conor was very reserved in the lead up to the fight. I hope that does not come back this week. You know, he's going to be eating healthy. He's going to be eating full of dinner. You know, 170 pounds. I heard he was out with a Brazilian barbecue the other day. You know, he doesn't have to do anything here. He can just take it easy. So I'm expecting him to be have a lot of fire in his belly now when we arrive in Vegas.
But for now, we salute Michael the Count Bisping, England's own. Finally gets over that hump. He's been in so many number one contender fights, and yes, this wasn't billed as a number one contender fight, but the biggest fight of his career, the unofficial title fight, and he won, in my opinion, fair and square. I know that bothers a lot of people, but I too had it 3 rounds to 2 for Michael Bisping. Congratulations to him, and a job well done to both Simon Head and PT Carroll. A lot of fun covering the card with you guys, and I believe I'll be seeing you both in Las Vegas, right?
On a flight 11:30 tomorrow morning.
How about that?
This morning.
Yes, how about that? All right, for now we say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching our coverage of UFC Fight Night London all week long. We're back Monday for a cracking, I believe they say cracking lineup here in England of the MMA Hour. Can't wait for that. We'll recap this and, of course, look ahead to what PT calls the Carnival UFC 196. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you Monday.